Welcome. I am John Cullen. This is the John Cullen Podcast. We're going to take a closer look today at one of the videos that we published a few months back called Those Are Jets, Not Helicopters. And the reason we're going to do that is this video gets into detail about exactly what is in the sky the night of October 1st, 2017. So this podcast will be sort of a director's commentary. This video, These Are Jet Aircraft, Not Helicopters, takes a really close look at what aircraft are in the sky. The venue for the Route 91 Festival is right next to McCarran Airport, and that's somewhat obvious. So jet aircraft are coming and going all night long. So here's a quick correction. There are 9 aircraft that depart McCarran from 9:59 until 10:15 that night. And these are those aircraft. One of them is missing, which is Virgin. I'll show you that in a second. So these are the aircraft that depart McCarran from 9:59 to 10:15, plus the Virgin VRD 1260. So that's a total of 9 aircraft. Right at the beginning of Tall Ace of Spades, there's an aircraft between Mandalay and Delano. And originally we thought this was a helicopter. Listen to the first 9 seconds. Listen to what you're hearing in the background. Originally, we thought we were hearing the sound of gunfire, and that this was the gunfire inside the hotel towards Campos or Shuck. Turns out that's not the case. It was 10 beats per second, so we thought we were hearing 10 round per second gunfire, but it turns out this is not gunfire. This sound is consistent, and we hear it again and again and again, and it continues on. So this is not gunfire inside the hotel. This is something else entirely. I want you guys to listen very closely to these first 9 seconds of Tall Ace of Spades and see if with headphones you can identify what you're hearing here. We do know that Frontier FFT 1122 departed. This is the Flight Radar 24 playback from that evening, and that's the FFT 1122 departing. We see some more lights flashing in between Mandalay and Delano. So the question is, what is that we're hearing in the first 9 seconds? And is that FFT 1122? I'm going to jump ahead 22 seconds and show you something rather remarkable. But this is the evidence that you're not going to see elsewhere, which is the aircraft heading back eastward in that same slot between the 2 hotels. Watch closely. The original footage here, this is Tall Ace of Spades, first shots, rare. So if that was FFT 1122 taking off, who is this and what are they doing? Obviously, this is another aircraft. This is not the jet we saw departing 27 seconds ago. Can't be. So that can't be FFT 1122. I mean, planes don't make 180-degree turns after taking off, right? We just saw an aircraft in that airspace, and then we see an aircraft heading back eastbound. Now, this is very difficult to see. The original image is really tough. Let's zoom in on this and see if we make it a little bit easier for you guys to see this. There we go. So I enhanced the contrast, brought up the white levels a little bit. So this aircraft is now heading eastbound. So that can't be a jet. The jets that were departing that night were all departing westbound. And we just saw an aircraft in this airspace heading the other way. So we believe this aircraft is a helicopter, and you now know why. When we check Flight Radar 24, we don't see anything there. The time frame is about 10:03 p.m. right between Delano and Mandalay, with a view of the concert. So this is approximately where we believe that helicopter was when it was filmed at 10:03 p.m. So we believe that was the first shot fired. Nobody's reported on this other than us, by the way. This is 10:04:40 p.m. in this footage. Now, this evidence is not conclusive. This is simply something that shouldn't be there. There's no explanation for it. But it's certainly earlier than any other shot that's been reported before. This is before 10:05. This is 10:04:40. That places the helicopter in this airspace. What I did was position the camera between Luxor and Delano. So this is approximately the view they have from the helicopter when that shot takes place. So then we see this aircraft. We thought it was a helicopter in the first videos that we did back in October 2017. We now realize this is Frontier FFT 1116. So this is a jet taking off, and in our first videos, this was what we call a false positive. We identified it as a helicopter, but it wasn't, it was a jet. And that doesn't mean that the other sightings that are helicopters are also jets. It just means this was a false positive. So we now see it continuing on its trajectory. It's visible between the two hotels. 6 seconds later, the shots are going to ring out. All right, so it's 10:05 and 24 seconds. And this is synchronized to the LVMPD body cams. So Tall Ace of Spades looks over his left shoulder when he hears these shots. Now, as the song ends, listen very carefully in between the songs and listen to what you hear in the background. All right, listen closely. And we see this aircraft. Why did Tall Ace of Spades turn and look over his left shoulder, do a double take? Why is the sound of these three shots only clear on his recording? The recordings that were made on the other side of the venue closer to Mandalay, we barely hear these three shots, and I don't understand why that is. Unless, of course, the audio difference between Tall Ace of Spades and the Tonelli footage, which was recorded on the other side of the venue much closer to Mandalay Bay and the Luxor, is dramatic. The Tonelli footage picks up the automatic gunfire. The first, I think it's 5 or 6 rounds that are fired that are automatic. The 3 rounds that we hear fired from Tall Ace of Spades, which sound like a high-powered rifle, are not quite that audible on the Tonelli footage. And the automatic rifle fire that we hear so clearly on the Tonelli footage is barely audible on the Tall Ace of Spades. The only way to explain that is if the gunfire is coming from 2 different locations. It wouldn't make any sense otherwise. If all this gunfire was coming from 30-135, it would be equally easy to hear or difficult to hear all of the gunfire. We have these 3 distinct high-powered rifle shots, and then we have automatic weapon fire. We highlighted this in one of our videos called 2 Guns, 2 Shooters, something like that, well over a year ago. I'll play you guys a clip from that right now just to show you the point. This is the Tonelli footage. Yes, you heard I was put onto the metal and the point of juxtaposing the Tonelli footage on top of the Tall Ace of Spades is we're hearing something completely different on the other side of the venue than we are on the Tall Ace of Spades microphone. Tall Ace of Spades is clearly picking up the 3 high-powered rifle shots, and the Tonelli footage is clearly picking up this automatic gunfire, this tat-tat-tat-tat-tat stuff. So very, very different. The only explanation for that is 2 shooters, 2 locations. The other thing you'll notice in this Tonelli footage, which we're going to address in either the next podcast or 2 podcasts down, will be the laser. And do we see the laser in the Tonelli footage, and do we see it in any other footage? And we think we might. So we'll take a closer look at that in a future podcast. So clearly this is an aircraft, but we just saw FFT 1116 departing, so this can't be that aircraft. It's 10:05:30 p.m., and WestJet WJA 1791 isn't airborne yet. Sundance has already landed. So this is another important aspect. When Sundance went on their tour just before 10 o'clock, there were only 2 helicopters, and we see both of them returning from the tour on flight radar. 2 Sundance helicopters returning. But in this video clip that was shot by one of the concert attendees, we see 3 aircraft. So if you watch the aircraft coming in from the left, they're coming from the north, heading southbound. This camera is facing east. And we see Sundance number 2 returning. But then we have a 3rd aircraft. So on the video footage we see 3, but on flight radar we see 2. Why the discrepancy? So along the west side of the runway, you see 1 Sundance returning now heading south. Here comes the 2nd Sundance coming in, turning towards their base, but we don't see the 3rd aircraft. Now remember, the only reason we're looking at these helicopters in the first place is that we don't see any evidence of gunfire coming from room 32-135. There's no photographic evidence, there's no video evidence. So does this 3rd aircraft warrant further investigation? Who is this, and what are they doing? If we go to the map and we look at where is this dot of light, where do we see this aircraft? It's effectively right above the tanks. And when we did the distance ranging of the cracked thumb, we found that that's the radius that it would need to be for the, where was that shot coming from based on the cracked thump delay. And this is that radius. So it's very possible the first shots were coming from that aircraft. We hear the ululation only on this recording. We don't hear it on anybody else's recording, and that's a bit curious. Why don't we hear that elsewhere? It must be that the ululation came from somewhat close to Tall Ace of Spades. And then we have the first extended burst of gunfire. The next aircraft to depart is WestJet WJA 1791. It departs at 10:06, and we're going to see that aircraft on a police officer's body cam in 60 seconds. So that begs the question, what's this that we're seeing here? So either this is WestJet WJA 1791, or the aircraft we see 60 seconds later is, but they both can't be the same departing flight. Right now it is 10:06 p.m. in this video.
Stay down. Stay down. Everybody stay down.
And then in this police officer's body cam, we're going to corroborate this aircraft sighting.
Go.
Now in this section, we're going to see shots fired right above the venue. These helicopters are north of the venue, near the Tropicana. This would explain the spent casings that were witnessed by Joe Napoli and the other woman that we featured in a video that Eddie Schmitz interviewed. This would explain that we've got helicopters north of the venue here firing on the crowd. So there's no explanation. These aircraft are not on flight radar. There's no explanation for that. So there's nothing on flight radar. Nothing in this airspace on flight radar at this moment. No gunfire coming from 32-135. So who are these aircraft? Where would these helicopters be? In what airspace? Right about here. Firing down on the crowd as they're running away. So as people are escaping, they're being fired on. Now it's 10:07 p.m.
Gotta be, right? Yeah.
Is this WJA on departure? They had a 10:06 departure time. It's now 10:07. Now, if that's not WJA, and they already departed, then who is this? So one of them is WJA, and one of them is not. Now, if this is WestJet, then there's no explanation for the aircraft we saw 60 seconds earlier. The next flight to depart is NKS 805, and that departs at 10:08. It's not yet 10:08, so we know it's not that. We believe this is a jet, not a helicopter, and that the earlier aircraft that we saw was the helicopter. We believe this is the WJA flight. So what we're seeing here on the body cam, that's the WestJet flight. And the reason is the trajectory and the nav lights are a little bit more visible. The trajectory is even.
720, we need to evacuate the east side.
Come on. Go. Come on. Everybody out this way.
361 CP, do we want everyone
Come on.
to switch over to convention?
No, out. Go, come on.
So if that was WJA 1791, the next flight to depart is NKS 805, and that departs at 10:08 p.m.
Come on.
We just saw the SUV get shot. Now the question is, where was the SUV shot from? And just moments earlier, we saw the helicopters north of the venue firing down on the crowd. There's a wall to the left here between the sidewalk and the venue that's, 1.5 meters high. So in order to hit the SUV down low, the shooter would need to be up high. So this is consistent with the shooters being in helicopters and the helicopters being over the crowd. Starting at about 10:08 p.m., there's no automatic gunfire for quite some time here. We synchronized the Tall Ace of Spades footage with one of the body cams that was inside one of the patrol cars heading towards the scene so that we could put the timestamp on there and you would see what was happening. Turns out that this particular body cam footage is going to be rather pivotal in another minute. But right now at 10:08, no automatic gunfire.
All right, go, go, go.
At 10:08:42, we switch over to this officer's body cam because he picks up another aircraft. So it's 10:08:42 p.m. That aircraft that we see heading westbound, that's a jet. That's not a helicopter. That's NKS 805. It departed at 10:08 p.m. So that's a jet. We pick that up on the body cam. But we also pick up a shot fired from room 32134. That's rather pivotal. And you see how he's pointing right at where room 32134 is? He just has the elevation wrong a little bit, but he's pointing directly at the room. So we see the muzzle blast. We hear the shot. The officer points directly in that direction. And we have evidence of shots fired from 32134. We hear another shot fired from the room. We don't see it, but we hear it. I want to take a moment to focus on the video in the lower right-hand corner. This is the body cam footage from release number 8, camera number 64. This is really pivotal in that this is the footage that we see the aircraft heading eastbound over the Mandalay Bay, and this is corroborated with a whole bunch of other footage. So this is taking place at 10:08, just about 10:09 right now, and this is the key footage. This is Las Vegas Metro Police Department body cam footage showing aircraft over the Mandalay heading eastbound, and again, there's nothing on flight radar. Sundance has already landed, and Maverick hasn't started to even turn on their transponders yet. So there's no aircraft in the vicinity. And yet when we look to the left of the rearview mirror, we see an aircraft in the sky heading eastbound. Looks like they're heading kind of northeast over the venue. They've crossed over Las Vegas Boulevard right about now. So this footage is really pivotal. And we use this footage to synchronize a lot of the other sightings because we've seen the helicopters flying over the venue. The question is, well, where did they come from? We just saw the helicopters flying eastbound over Mandalay. So is this the helicopter that Corey Langdon was hearing? Quite possibly.
Control, be advised, shots are coming from
Shotgun.
Gate 7. Shots are coming from Gate 7.
So here's a perfect example. We're synchronizing that same footage with the patrol officer who's running towards Mandalay. That we see the body cam inside the patrol car showing the aircraft over the venue. This officer captures it on his body-worn camera. And so this corroborates that aircraft heading eastbound over Mandalay from another vantage point. So it's not a speck on the windshield. I might even go as far as to say that this particular footage right here, along with the body cam footage from inside that patrol car, this corroborated sighting, this is the most damning evidence of all that this was an aerial attack. Hunter UK, formerly known as UFO Hunter UK, asked me if I could create a 3D map and show where these aircraft were in space at the times that we sight them. So, using Google Earth and these particular sightings from the Tall Ace of Spades video, I went back into Google Earth and said, okay, approximately if we were there, let's put the camera there in Google Earth and see what the view appears to be. So this is approximately where that aircraft would be in space. This sighting is a little bit more difficult to see, but lower in altitude. This is still north of the Luxor. So what makes these sightings so pivotal is that there's no aircraft north of the Luxor on the west side on Flight Radar 24. Absolutely nothing. So who are these aircraft? If there's nothing on Flight Radar, this is not jets arriving, this is not jets departing. They're heading southbound behind the Luxor, which is the route that's typically taken by a tour group, but there's no tours out right now. Sundance has landed, Maverick has yet to depart. So who is flying behind the Luxor during the gunfire? That's the big question. And since nobody has been able to identify these aircraft in a year and a half, I think it's safe to say that they're suspicious, and that the likelihood that this is where the shooters are is rather high, given that there's no evidence of gunfire coming from 32-135. So we see now 2 aircraft between Delano and Mandalay Bay. How is that possible? That's 2. So 2 aircraft between the 2 buildings. Even if one of them is a jet taking off, what's the other one? It's unidentified. For a year and a half. Nobody can pinpoint it. And now we see the aircraft heading up and above the Mandalay Bay. This is the one that was spotted from the police body cam inside the cruiser and from the cop running southbound on Las Vegas Boulevard.
Where is coming from?
The aircraft is heading eastbound right now, about to cross over Las Vegas Boulevard. And then it appears that it's starting to head northward, or northeastward. And finally, I want you to listen very carefully. Thank you for listening to our first podcast. More to come. Stay tuned.